Okay, so get this, right? Today we are diving deep into some early 2000s music software. We're talking Venezuela, piano pedagogy, and a program calling itself, wait for it, Piano Professor Tomo.
It's very niche.
Yeah, and before you hit that skip button thinking, ugh, tech analysis, trust me, this isn't just some dusty old program. This is like a window into how one developer was trying to capture like musical expertise in a time before AI was,
The buzzword.
exactly. It's that AI buzzword
Right.
that we know and love today.
It's true, yeah. This thesis, Piano Professor Tomo, it's like a time capsule of like early music tech ambition, Especially coming out of Venezuela. I mean, it's not exactly Silicon Valley.
Right, exactly.
It's not a place we think of when we think of software development.
Right. And what really got me like hooked into this whole thing is the problem that our developer, Jose Angel, was trying to solve. He's talking about all these students, right, beginners especially, and they're putting in the hours, they're practicing, but they're practicing wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine spending all that time and you're basically just learning all these bad habits?
Right. It's so common.
It's got to be so frustrating. For the student, for the teacher.
Yeah, and it's easy to underestimate how important like even small errors can be when you're learning piano.
Oh, absolutely. And that is where this thesis gets super interesting. Jose Angel, he throws out this stat. He says that a typical piano exercise can have 260 notes.
A whole lot of notes.
And we're talking about your hand exercises, your scales, arpeggios, all the stuff that makes you want to like
Pull your hair out.
exactly tear your hair out.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it, if there's a little error in timing or rhythm on each one of those notes, well, those tiny little errors,
They add up.
they snowball. It's like,
Compound interest, but bad.
yes, bad musical compound interest. I love that. And that is where my friend Piano Professor Tomo comes in. So this software analyzes something called MIDI input, which is basically like the digital language that your digital piano uses.
Yeah.
And it compares it to a perfect version of whatever you're playing.
Ambitious.
Right. It's like having this super-powered metronome that's like judging your every move. But hold on, it's the early 2000s, right?
Right.
How good could this analysis be? I mean, were we past dial-up yet?
Well, I think you might be surprised. This isn't just about hitting the right keys. This is about, when the thesis talks about like Piano Professor Tomo being designed to analyze duration and placement.
Okay, hold on. Time for a quick ELI 5. Explain, like I'm 5 for our listeners who maybe aren't like piano nerds like us.
Of course, yes.
What do their terms even mean?
All right.
Duration, placement.
Okay, so imagine you're tapping your finger, to a beat. Duration is how long you're holding your finger down for each tap. Are we talking quick, short taps, or are we talking long, sustained ones?
Okay.
And placement is about where those taps fall within the beat. So are you right on it? A little ahead?
Behind.
Behind, exactly.
So it's like a drummer.
Yes, exactly.
Keeping perfect time. It's not just hitting the drum. It's how and when you hit it.
Precisely. And just like a drummer needs to be on point with their timing, so does a pianist. And that is what I think Jose Angel was trying to capture.
Okay, so we've got the digital piano. It's talking to the software. We're analyzing these subtle little nuances of timing.
Yeah.
But how does the program know what's right and wrong?
Right.
Did this guy, Jose Angel, did he just program in like his own interpretation of Chopin or something?
So this is where it gets smart. Instead of just imposing, his own personal style, he brought in the big guns. He got 5 professional pianists.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he had them play the exercises, meticulously recorded them to create this gold standard of performance data.
5 different pianists. I mean, come on, their interpretations, they couldn't have been exactly the same.
Of course not. They weren't. That's the point. He wasn't looking for robotic uniformity. What he did was he analyzed these recordings to figure out a range of acceptable errors, right? Like what's the margin?
Error margins.
Okay. Yeah.
So how does that work when we're talking about music? Like a musical phrase?
Yeah.
Are we talking milliseconds here? Or...
Yeah.
So he's basically saying like, even the pros, they're not perfect robots. There's a little wiggle room. Yeah.
Exactly. There's some humanness in there.
There's some humanity, some style. It's kind of reassuring, to be honest.
It is. And that's what's so innovative about the software, I think. It wasn't trying to completely eliminate human interpretation. It was trying to learn from it, use it as this teaching tool.
Okay, but let's be real for a sec. We're talking about analyzing music.
Yeah.
Right? There's got to be more to it than just hitting the right notes at the right time.
Yeah.
What about dynamics, phrasing, all that stuff that gives you emotion, the thing that makes you want to close your eyes and just feel the music, you know?
Right, right. You're hitting on a really key point, which is that, look, as advanced as piano professor Tomo was, especially for the time, it was still limited by like what was possible technologically back then in the early
Mm.
2000s, you know. It could analyze those technical aspects we were talking about, the duration, the placement, all that, but capturing the soul of the music, that's a much higher bar, you know?
It's like it could tell you if you were playing like the notes of a Mozart sonata correctly.
Right.
But it couldn't tell you if you were playing it like Mozart, you know?
Exactly, exactly. And Jose Angel, he actually says this in the thesis. There's a part where he talks about how important it still is to have that human teacher there, to give feedback on I guess you could say, the more subjective parts of playing. Like a teacher can tell if you're like just going through the motions, or if you're really like feeling it.
Because nobody wants to listen to a robot play piano,
No.
no matter how accurate it is.
It's that human element. It's that like storytelling. That's what really like gets you.
Okay, so piano professor Tomo,
Mm.
maybe it couldn't teach you how to play with soul, but it sounds like this thing was still like way ahead of its time. Like, what do you think Jose Angel would even think about like music software today?
Oh man, it's so interesting to think about, right? Like we've come so far with AI and music tech, even in the last 20 years. But here's the thing, even with all that, a lot of the ideas behind Piano Professor Tomo, they're still totally relevant.
Yeah.
The idea of like looking at how experts play and then using tech to give, really specific feedback, that's still a huge part of music education, research, all of it.
So this wasn't just like some quirky little experiment. This was like groundwork.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, Jose Angel, he even talks about, some of his ideas for the future of the software in the thesis. And one that I thought was super interesting was this idea that he had about detecting fingering errors.
Wait, hold on. The software could like tell if you were using the wrong finger on a key.
That was the idea. So he was imagining this system that could actually analyze like the movements of your hands, not just the sound they were making, which, remember, this is back when webcam tech was,
Basic.
very basic.
It's like he was like a music tech Nostradamus or something. But wait, hold on a sec. Detecting fingering errors, that's getting a little, I don't know, a little Big Brother, isn't it?
Right.
Like part of the fun of playing music is like finding your own way.
Oh,
Like,
for sure. For sure. That's a very valid concern. And it's something people are still talking about today with all the AI stuff. But I think if you go back to how Jose Angel was talking about it, it's not about being like, you have to do it this way. It's more about just like information, giving teachers and students more information to help them, get better at what they do.
It's like instead of a teacher just saying, oh, that sounds a little bit off, they can be like, this is exactly why it's off, and here's how to fix it.
Yes, exactly. And that kind of like precision, especially for someone who's just starting out, it can make a huge difference.
It's like having a little digital coach, whispering in your ear like, hey, your pinky's, not pulling its weight on that arpeggio.
Right.
But this is all like technical stuff. Did Jose Angel ever talk about like software being able to analyze the more, I don't know, the more artistic parts of music? Like, could this thing ever tell you that your like interpretation of Debussy was, too melancholic? It'd be like teaching a computer about heartbreak. Like you can give it all the sad music in the world, all the poems, but can it ever really feel it?
Right. That's the question, isn't it? And it's bigger than just music, too. It's like, can you ever really get a machine to be creative, to have that human touch?
To really understand.
Yeah. And I mean, in the thesis, Jose Angel doesn't really go too deep into like analyzing the feeling of music,
Yeah.
He's more focused on the technical side.
Makes sense.
But he does kind of hint at the idea that maybe someday software could be able to pick up on those subtle things like, the tiny changes in timing or how loud or soft something is and how that connects to the emotion of the music.
So instead of just like playing all the notes at the same volume like a robot would, it could like tell how a human pianist would, I don't know, speed up, slow down, get louder, get softer, all that stuff to make it like interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Like imagine the software analyzes a performance and it goes, okay, you're good technically, but it's a little stiff, Listen to how, say, Rubinstein plays it. He uses rubato, this sort of speeding up and slowing down to make you really feel it, like a sense of longing.
Wow.
It'd be like having this whole library of like expressive tricks, but all laid out for you.
That's wild. Although I do wonder, like, would some musicians think that was I don't know, maybe a bit much. Like, isn't part of what makes music great the fact that you can play it your own way?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a good point. But for me, I think how Jose Angel saw this piano professor Tomo thing, it wasn't about replacing that human element. It was more about, like, giving it a boost. Like, imagine a young pianist.
Right.
They're trying to play Chopin, but it just isn't working. The software could be like, hey, here's what the masters do. And suddenly, boom, it clicks. Stuff they might spend years figuring out on their own.
Like having a mentor in the machine, basically.
Right, a 24/7 music coach.
No extra charge for those late night practice sessions.
Exactly. But seriously, when you really think about where music education is going, it's a trip, right?
Yeah, it really is.
Will everyone have AI teachers someday? Will, like, real teachers even be a thing?
Big questions.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think there's one right answer. But what I find cool about Jose Engel, what he was doing, he wasn't afraid of human teachers, you know? He saw piano professor Tomo as a way to help them, to take some of the load off so they could focus on the stuff that really makes music special, the stuff even a computer can't teach.
So less like man versus machine, more like working together.
Exactly, like a partnership. And figuring that out, that's going to keep us busy for a long, long time.
That's for sure.
And if anyone out there listening, you know, if you love music, if you think about these things, stick with that. It's a question worth asking. How can we use all this amazing tech we have to learn more about music, appreciate it more, but without losing sight of, you know, the human part? That's the magic right there.
For sure. It really is. Well, that just about wraps up our deep dive into the world of piano professor Tomo. It's a wild ride, that early 2000s music tech, but there you have it. Technology can be an incredible tool, right, as we're all figuring out our own creative journeys. But we got to use it right, enhance things, not erase what makes art, art.